with all their sufferings, with all their worries, fears, sickness, and so forth. Which are the results of their basic misapprehension of reality. So focusing on all these sentient beings generate affectionate love, a sincere sense of care and acceptance. As well as a deep sense of affection. Which comes from a sense of closeness with all these beings. And that affection then gives way to great compassion, focusing on the endless pain, misery sentient beings are going through time and again. A loving attitude that wishes for each and every sentient being to be free from suffering and its causes. And aspires to be able to protect them from these sufferings and its causes, to help them overcome what prevents them from being liberated. And as that aspiration grows stronger, it transforms into the altruistic attitude, the determination to do whatever I can to help sentient beings overcome suffering and its causes. And since realistically we can only accomplish that if we first become a Buddha, an enlightened being, let's generate bodhicitta, the aspiration to become completely enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. Try to generate that mind from depth of your heart. I also think that it is with that aspiration that we'll continue to study fundamental wisdom. It's for the benefit of all sentient beings. We learn and meditate on emptiness. So while holding a visualization of the Buddha in front of us and all sentient beings around us, let's recite the prayer. Edward, can you display the prayer? Okay, never mind. I'll just recite it. It's okay. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. Great. So as a co-host, I just display that. What is it? Here it is. Can you see the Lamrim outlines? Okay, great. All right. So, well, today it's death. After we reflected on the precious human rebirth, the advantages of having such a human life and so forth, well, now it's time to remember that, well, we won't have this for very long. Death may come any time, and so it's considered extremely important from a Buddhist point of view to reflect on death. Some of you might find that scary, and it's definitely helpful to reflect on where that fear comes from and to face it as much as possible. And of course, others may find it really effective, but we can never do it enough, that kind of meditation, simply because we have a sense, I won't die today. So to reflect on death basically means to reflect on impermanence. And there are two types of impermanence. There's a subtle type and there's a gross or coarse type. So here we're focusing on the coarse type, on the gross type of impermanence that we can actually perceive even without sense consciousnesses. We can see the changes all around us. They happen, that may not happen each second. I mean, well, of course, these changes do happen, but we don't perceive them, but we perceive the coarse changes the seasons, people coming and going, people meeting and then separating again, and of course people being born and dying again. So here we focus mainly on the impermanence of death, of our own immortality. And now a problem is that not intellectually, this is not an intellectual way of thinking. It's more an emotional type of thinking, that we feel I'm not going to die today. If we're healthy and strong and things are going well for us, there's a very strong sense, oh, I'm not going to die. But even if we're terminally ill, I mean, we have got days left to live, still we have a sense, I'm not going to die today. Make plans, think ahead. Of course, there's the hope to live longer, but even without that, there's this sense things will remain the same. And that is a huge problem, of course, obviously, just from the point of view of having this precious human life. Well, we keep procrastinating if we are not aware that this is not going to last forever. We have this great opportunity, possibly for the first time, and now it's about making use of it right here and right now, and not to procrastinate our practice. So therefore, there are disadvantages of not remembering death in terms of having meditated on our previous life, on our precious human rebirth. Now, well, one of the disadvantages, if we don't remember death, we won't remember or be mindful of the Dharma. There's time to practice. I'll start next week, I'll start tomorrow, and so forth. Therefore, to become aware, first of all, of the disadvantages, so for your own practice, to remember why it's so important to think of death in terms of our Dharma practice. And even if we remember the Dharma, if we don't reflect on death, we won't practice it. Well, here it says we will procrastinate. We'll put it off to do it some other time. And even if we practice, if we don't reflect on death purely, the 8 worldly dharmas will come in, will be mixed with our practice. So attachment, obsession, attachment with gain, with pleasure, with fame, and being praised. So wanting to, of course, have pleasant experiences, wanting to gain things, wanting to have a good reputation, and of course being praised, having done things well and so forth, that people kind of telling us that and so forth. And of course, trying to avoid the opposite of, loss, displeasure, or unpleasant experiences, scorn, being criticized, and being unpopular, being not experiencing fame, so not having a good reputation. So therefore, as part of this practice for this week, please remember that. Remember the disadvantages of not thinking of death. And of course, reflect on your own death. Reflect on it, and we'll do more of it next time. But spend some time with summarizing what we've done before, the fact that we have this precious opportunity, we've got everything going for us to actually practice the Dharma. And so now, well, we don't know when it's going to end. Today may be my last day. This may be my last week, my last year, well, whichever feels most effective. And generate that determination. I will remember, because if I don't remember my own death, I won't be mindful of the Dharma, I will procrastinate, and even if I practice, my practice won't be pure. Okay, so that's for next week, for this coming week, not next, this week. And of course, I don't mention it enough, to be honest. I did mention it a lot more during the entry into the middle way, but not to forget, of course, your practice of bodhicitta, your practice of compassion. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama always reminds us, well, emptiness anyway, so that's part of what we study. But of course, also start your meditation, start your day basically with generating bodhicitta. Those are some of the steps. When we do the meditation, we go through those steps. You may choose other steps, whatever feels more comfortable. But the point is to generate the mind of enlightenment again and again. And then at the same time, of course, remember your own immortality. Great. That's for this week. And I've been told there were 2 questions. Unfortunately, we've had some technical issues, so I won't be able to, I didn't get the questions yet, so I will next time. For next time, I'll answer those. Okay, so we can go right away. Well, anyway, I answer the questions usually later, but just so that you're aware. And then we'll continue with this material. Okay, just a sec. So we finished the 8 attributes. We talked about the 4 aspects that every qualified commentary, Indian commentary, well, in this case, Indian commentary, any qualified treatise needs to have to be called a treatise. And now it's about the root misperception. Okay. And again, I'm following Lama Tsongkhapa's text, his Ocean of Reasoning. So he mentions these misperceptions. There are subdivisions, and well, taking it from the ultimate purpose, of course, Buddhism, learning about Buddhism, reflecting on it, meditating on it, has a certain purpose, has a certain goal. The goals are liberation and, if possible, enlightenment. So what's important is that we need to now eliminate something. We need to get rid of something, which is this rude misperception of reality. Okay. And this type of misperception can be gradually overcome by meditating on the way things really are. Okay, so it's important to internalize that. The fact that every trouble in this world, our personal trouble, of course, but also all the problems we find in this world, conflict, war, disagreement, pain, depression, fear, and so forth, all of those have their origin in that basic misperception. So that's initially difficult to believe. I mean, the cause of all our trouble is that mind. And our main problem is that we don't actually recognize it within ourselves. It's a type of consciousness, we'll talk more about it, that is mistaken with regard to reality. So we have to look at its object, but that's the difficulty. What is the object of that mind? And not just in our own case, but all other sentient beings have that same type of mind. Well, all other sentient beings means those who are not liberated yet. All other beings, unliberated beings, they have that type of mind. And they're controlled by that. And actually generating sincere love and compassion for other sentient beings, to be able to do that, it's really helpful to reflect on the fact that there's this basic misapprehension and everyone's got it. Now, if we look around, if we kind of reflect on what's going on in the world, for instance, I mean, those beings who cause a lot of trouble, who start a lot of conflicts, who are really cruel and nasty in whatever they do, well, let's remember they're totally controlled by that root misperception, which then, of course, gives way to or gives rise to self-cherishing. And the stronger the self-cherishing, the deeper the trouble this person is having. And then that self-cherishing, that attachment to I and my happiness, gives rise to hatred and greed and all the other afflictive emotions. And of course, the suffering that they create for others, incredible, but the greatest suffering that they create is for themselves. And to remember that doesn't mean we should let them do whatever they do and not try and prevent them and discipline them and so forth, if we can do that, actually. That doesn't mean that, but to generate compassion, to include them into all sentient beings who are controlled by that misperception, at least the ones who have not been liberated. So anyway, this type of misconception, it can be overcome. It's just difficult to do. And how can we do it? To understand how phenomena really exist, because that misperception is mistaken on that deepest level of how phenomena do exist. So therefore, and that's actually I copied this from Lama Tsongkhapa, nirvana and samsara, nirvana and cyclic existence respectively, exist by virtue of seeing and not seeing the actual mode of existence of all phenomena. It's actually as simple as that. So what is the first step, therefore, in the process of cultivating an understanding of the way phenomena really exist? Well, the first step is to identify this root misperception. Because until we have identified that type of mind, that type of erroneous, mistaken mind, and very important, the object that it perceives, we cannot understand the method to overcome it. Okay, so which involves negating the object. Because, and this is again from the ocean of reasoning, this would be like shooting an arrow without seeing the target. Because it's like we need to get rid of something. There's a type of mind that we all have. And if we want to help others, of course, to get rid of that type of mind, start with ourselves, try to overcome it ourselves, which doesn't mean we don't help others in the meantime, but to be realistic, to most effectively benefit others. So when we generate compassion, when we generate bodhicitta and so forth, however fake it may be in the beginning, but it's kind of like, well, fake it until you make it. You do it over and over again. And before long, it's just the nature of our mind. We become more and more used to it and it comes easier and easier. But let's be realistic that we can be only most effective once we remove this ourselves. So we start here, start with our own mind, try and recognize first that root misperception in order then to work on overcoming it. So understanding it is vital. But this root misperception is not just a mind that's ignorant about something and doesn't know how phenomena really exist. So it's like, I just don't know. It's not that type of mind. It also perceives phenomena. So it is ignorant, of course it is, and it doesn't know how phenomena exist, but it's more than that. It's a mind that actively perceives phenomena to exist in a way that is the direct opposite of how they actually exist. So that is diametrically opposed. It's just another way of saying it's directly the opposite. It perceives phenomena to exist exactly in the opposite way as they actually exist. Okay, it apprehends them to exist inherently by their own character, from their own side, and so forth. Okay, so anyway, so maybe that chart helps you a little bit to understand it better. So you have these three aspects. You have the mind, the agent itself, mind. Then there's an activity of the mind and an object. Usually, consciousness is explained in terms of those three aspects. The mind itself, what is its nature? What is its definition, if you like? And of course, that definition takes us to what it does. That's an activity, it does something. Every mind does something. So what is it that it does? And of course, it does something with something else, with an object. So here, the root misperception is a conceptual consciousness. It's not a sense consciousness. It's a mental consciousness. And a conceptual mind versus a direct experiencing mind. It's not a directly experiencing mind. It's a conceptual mind. It relies on images, on conceptual images. So here, therefore, the root misperception is that kind of mind, conceptual consciousness. And what does it do? Well, it does what every mind does, really. It perceives something, it apprehends something, it grasps. Okay, the word grasping is used actually just in English, not in Tibetan. In Tibetan, it's always the same word, zimba. But when it's expressed in a certain way, this word zimba, it takes on that strong meaning of grasping, right? That's why in some contexts, especially when it comes to the root misperception, you use the word grasping. self-grasping. But as I said, in Tibetan is really just the word zimba, which ordinarily means perceiving, apprehending, but just the way it's put in this really short way, denzin, danzin. It's kind of this short way of saying it. It comes across as stronger, which is why it's translated as grasping. But anyway, it's just holding something, apprehending something, grasping something. That's what it does. So being aware, perceiving, apprehending. That's what it does. And what is it? Was the object? The inherent existence of a phenomenon. Not just inherent existence. It's not just inherent. It's impossible that the mind perceives just inherent existence. It always perceives the inherent existence of something. Think of, for instance, holding on to permanence, a mind that perceives, apprehends permanence. It's always the permanence of something, my own life, permanence of my own life, my own situation, my relationship, and so forth. Okay, so that is mind with its activity and its object. All right, that's just a simple version. And of course, you intellectually understand that, hopefully understand that, and then we take it to ourselves. Can I recognize that type of mind in my own continuum? That's the challenge, of course, to understand it first outside of ourselves, but then to internalize that and try to recognize it within ourselves. And that's really, really difficult to do. Anyway, so even though every awareness that is a root misconception is the same, so we're talking about just misconception, root misconception. I'm not talking about all conceptual minds. I'm not talking about all wrong consciousnesses, perceiving, I don't know, that which is actually in the nature of suffering to be happiness, or that which is actually impermanent to perceiving that to be permanent. I'm not talking about these wrong consciousnesses. I'm talking about the underlying root misconception. There are different types, but they're all the same, in that they wrongly apprehend this kind of unrealistic existence. But still, even though they're all the same in that they hold on to the inherent existence of something, they can be divided into at least two types. The mind grasping the self of persons and the mind grasping the self of phenomena. Okay, here's the word grasping is used because in Tibetan it's in that context and that way of kind of using it in this short kind of direct way, and therefore conveying the meaning of grasping, although it's actually the Tibetan word for apprehending. So mind grasping the self of persons, mind apprehending the self of persons, mind grasping or apprehending the self of phenomena. So this categorization is done in terms of what kind of object the conceptual consciousness perceives to exist inherently. What is the object? What is it? What is it that it perceives inherently? So the first type apprehends the inherent existence of a living being. Okay, mind grasping the self of person. So any living being. Versus something that is not a living being. So it's like you take everything that exists and divides it into living beings and everything else that is not. So why that random, weird, kind of in quotation marks, weird way of dividing phenomena? I mean, we are more familiar with dividing phenomena into that which is permanent and that which is impermanent. Okay. What else? What other divisions are there? These are the most basic ones. Well, anyway, that which is material and that which is non-material, which is non-physical, so physical, non-physical. No, but here, when it comes to the misapprehension of reality, this root misperception, we divide phenomena into living beings and not living beings. Why? Because this misperception, when it's directed at the I, that's when it's more harmful, in the sense that that gives rise to self-cherishing. And as we all know, self-cherishing, self-centeredness, well, is the root of all the other afflictive emotions. Therefore, we distinguish between the self and other phenomena. So grasping at living, like a living being existing inherently, versus grasping at anything else to exist inherently. So I took an example of perceiving the inherent existence of a mosquito. There's two ways of looking at that. The mosquito itself perceiving its own inherent existence, or myself sitting in my room and there's this annoying mosquito, can't sleep because of it, and I have that sense it exists inherently, and that gives rise, of course, to other afflictive emotions, and I may end up killing it. Anyway, so, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. Here's just an example of a root misperception that perceives a living being, human, animal, whatever, to exist inherently. The second type conceives the inherent existence of a phenomenon that is not a living being. For instance, the conceptual consciousness apprehending the inherent existence of one's own body, one's own mind. So it can of course also be one's own house and car and all the objects that we are attached to, our possessions, for instance. So anything that's not a living being. That's the first division. It's not difficult, but it just gives us a sense of what the root misperception, what we're focusing on. We're focusing on the fact that we perceive ourselves and other people to exist inherently, and then everything else. Okay, so mind grasping the self of persons, the root misperception, that is the blanket term, that is the general category of the general entity, and that can be divided, can be categorized into mind grasping the self of persons and mind grasping the self of phenomena. So what is that mind? It's a conceptual consciousness, again, a mental consciousness, perceiving the inherent existence of any living being. And then the other type is perceiving the inherent existence of anything that is not a living being. All right, so that's pretty simple. So now you'll come across something, and you've already noticed, I'm pretty sure if you studied the Dharma for some time, you've noticed a difficult thing, a difficult situation, if you like, where terms are used, the same word is used to describe two different things. And since they're quite similar, we get confused. So here the word self, mind grasping the self of persons. You've got twice the word being here. Mind grasping the self like a being, and person like a being. What are we talking about here? Mind grasping the being of being? It's a little confusing. So what do we think when we say self? What does that refer to? Well, the word self here has two meanings. So note that the word self, that is part of the terms mind grasping the self of persons and mind grasping the self of phenomena, does not refer to a self in the sense of a person. Does not refer to the merely designated, conventionally existent self, but to the object of negation of emptiness. So inherent existence. Inherent existence is here called self. It's almost like, why? Can you not find another word? And I'm just translating the Tibetan here. The Tibetan word for self is da. Da. So da actually means self, means I in some context, can mean I, self. And that is used when you say, for instance, selflessness, lack of inherent existence, is dame. Dame in like lessness, like non-existence of self. This is not the only example. We'll come to this. This will be part of this handout very soon. Conventional truth versus conventionally existent. They're not the same. And still, you have the word conventional. Conventionally existent and conventional truth. Tanye Demba, Tanye Duyeba in Tibetan. Or the opposite of that, ultimate truth, ultimate existence, or ultimate truth. So in the first case, sorry, I forgot to mention conventional truth versus conventionally existent. And then you've got ultimate truth versus ultimately existent. Ultimate truth, very important, ultimate truth. What does then ultimately existent mean? Ultimate existent is impossible. So ultimate existence is impossible, but ultimate truth exists. Oh, so confusing. So it's done quite a bit, like here with the self as well. There's a self that doesn't exist, and there's the self, well, the whole world turns around my own self, okay, myself. And then there's a self I deny, okay. I don't know exactly the reason for why this is done. I can only guess. It keeps us on our toes, right? It keeps you attentive, okay? They're really similar. So to really make sure that you understand this terminology well, because, well, who wants to be confused? But I don't know that that's the reason. But it happens time and again with a lot of these words, that especially we use them in the same context. If you use one in one context and the other in a different context, who cares? They're the same term, but they have different meanings depending on the context. Who cares? Because you don't use them together, but you do use self. In this case, self of persons, self of self, the mind grasping the self of self. So you could also say that, but fortunately they chose another term for self here, right? Anyway, there's two different meanings. One meaning of self is inherent existence. That's what we say. Selflessness refers to not inherent existence. So the self is the object of negation. It's that which we negate in order to understand emptiness. And then, of course, there's the conventional I, the conventional self. But usually you understand from context. In the Tibetan, it's the same. In the context, you understand exactly what are they talking about. Not always, but that's why it's good to pay attention. You know that in Tibetan, and you usually know that in English as well. But anyway, so I did this little chart thing here. Self, the word self, da in Tibetan. There's an existent version of it, and there's a non-existent version of it. Like I said, it's a little confusing, but I'm pretty sure it's on purpose. There are too many instances of terminology being similar, like I said, conventional existence, conventional truth, and so forth. Okay, so here in this case, self, existent self, the self that's merely designated on the basis of any of the aggregates of a living being. So when I get my arm and I say, oh, myself, my arm, it's long, it's short, it's this, is that, or I'm waving my arm, right? So on the basis of my arm, I label I or self, myself, I'm waving. So in that sense, it's the existent self that is labeled on the basis of any of my aggregates, okay? While my mind is meditating on the basis of that mind that's meditating, I label I'm meditating. So that's the conventional existent I, okay? And then there's the non-existent, well, the inherent existence of anything that exists, right? Anything that does actually exist. My mind, when it in a distorted way perceives its inherent existence, well, then that inherent existence, that distorted way of perceiving that object, that is the non-existent self. Okay. The mind grasping the selves of persons. Okay, so having established this, let's go back to the original way of looking at things. So mind grasping inherent existence of person and mind grasping inherent existence of phenomena. Now let's look at this one here, because so far I've just talked about living beings in general. Oh, one more thing, persons. The way we use the word person in everyday life is not how we use it here, because I'm not thinking of a mosquito as person, right? It's not like, oh, I've got a lot of persons in my room, they're like flying around. No. But that's the same in Tibetan, Kelsang. Kelsang is usually in the ordinary kind of day-to-day usage, refers to a person. It's not really a word you use that much. You don't talk about like a person is coming. You don't say Kelsang so much, but you can use it. And then in writing as well, you use it. And in a non-Buddhist context, it usually refers to a person, like a human being. However, in the Buddhist context, it includes all living beings. Right? I mean, you have only that many words you can use, and self has already been used. So if you say the self, the mind grasping the self of selves, that would be really unkind. Like, no way you can use that. So you want to use another word here for living being. And so they use the word person. So like I said, any being, anyone, any living being, a Buddha included, is a person. A mosquito is a person. an animal is a person, because it's, like I said, it's synonymous with living being, with living being. Okay, great. So self of person, therefore, remember that. Okay, but here we are talking about misperceiving a person to exist inherently. But where's the difference between myself and others? Because that's really important. Of course, we need to always take our personal perspective. That's where we're coming from. And there's a difference, obviously, perceiving myself to exist inherently and perceiving everyone other. And that's true for all of us. Okay, so perceiving myself to exist inherently and perceiving you to exist inherently. Huge difference. Because unfortunately, when I grasp at my own inherent existence, that gives rise to self-cherishing. But when I grasp at your inherent existence, that does not give rise to cherishing you guys. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen, right? So there's a huge difference, therefore, which is why it's important to distinguish mind grasping the self of persons that grasp at myself and grasp at others. Therefore, it's again subdivided. The mind grasping the self of persons can be subdivided into the view of the transitory collection. I know it's not a simple term. In Tibetan, it's the same. Jitsogi Dawa. It's not a word that you easily remember, especially when you hear it for the first time. The view of the transitory collection. That's just a complicated way of saying the mind grasping the self of myself, of oneself. So from my perspective, of course, when you grasp at myself as existing inherently, that mind of yours is not a view of the transitory collection, because you're looking at me, you're focusing on me and perceiving my inherent existence, perceiving me to exist inherently. But if I perceive myself to exist inherently, it becomes a view of the transitory collection, which gives rise to self-cherishing. The second one, the mind grasping the self of a person that is not oneself, as I just said, does not give rise to cherishing that other person. The first type perceives the inherent existence of one's I, of oneself, one's I. An example is the conceptual consciousness apprehending the inherent existence of one's past self when it was wrongly accused of theft or accused of anything. I think we're all familiar with that. Maybe even meditating and thinking, how dare they said that to me? They said I did such and such and I didn't. If I did, maybe not as bad, but if I didn't do it, it feels so much worse. And there's this sense, my I yesterday. Okay, it's not, I can even think of the I today, I tomorrow, I now. We do differentiate between the different types of I's, definitely in terms of time. So myself yesterday, that was wrongly accused. Okay, that's an example of me right now having a view of the transitory collection. I'll explain why it's called that. It'll be explained. So that's the first type, inherent existence of myself. The second type conceives the inherent existence of another living being. For example, the conceptual consciousness apprehending the inherent existence of the Buddha. Okay, not myself, but a Buddha, the Buddha, Buddha Shakyamuni. So now this weird term, why is it called that? I don't know what is the origin of the word. I have no idea, but the way it's usually explained is the transitory collection refers to one's body and mind. So it's a collection. It's more than one thing. It's a collection of the 5 aggregates. So that's a way of looking at mind and body, categorizing them, the physical, the psychophysical aggregates into those 5 aggregates. So it's a collection. Sure, it's more than one. And they're transitory because they're impermanent. They change moment by moment. Okay, that's the transitory collection. Now, the view of the transitory collection is the conceptual consciousness grasping the inherent existence of one's own self. Okay, that's the view of the transitory collection. And it's called such because it arises in dependence on these transitory aggregates. So it's in dependence on that I perceive there's an inherently existent I. If I didn't have a mind and a body, I mean, if I didn't have a mind, of course, there wouldn't be anyone grasping. There wouldn't be anything grasping. But besides that, even if I had that grasping mind, if I didn't have the other aggregates, well, what would I be grasping at? The only thing I could take as the basis for grasping at an I, that would be that mind, the self-grasping mind. So on the basis of that, I would ascribe, I would come up with this notion of an inherent I. So how does this actually happen? Well, it's as simple as that. First, I label on the basis of my mind doing something, my body doing something, my consciousness labels, oh, I'm doing. Whether I use the word I or anything else, anything to refer to myself, there's the thought X, Y, and Z. In this case, I am doing something. So it's really just labeling this I on the basis of the mind or the body or both. But then the mind believes that this I is not just labeled. There's really something there. There's really something there. There's something that goes beyond being labeled. There's the sense, I call it I because there is an I. There's something there between mind and body. And that is close to my mind. That's close to me. There's also something there when it comes to your mind and body, but that's far away from my mind, which is why it doesn't get attached to that. That's you. That's over there. That's other. No, I'm adding something to that merely labeled I. I ascribe to it some existence that goes above and beyond what's actually there. And I ascribe that to that merely labeled I. And that's another way of saying I ascribe to it inherent existence. And since it's become more solid, it's more concrete that it actually is, my mind then attaches itself to it. It's like, oh, this is close. This is my I here. And there's everyone else's I over there because it's not close to my mind. And so attachment arises, attachment to the I, attachment to my happiness, my well-being, my mind's well-being. Of course, the body's well-being is really the well-being of the mind itself, because without a mind, there can't be any pain in the body. And so it's really the mind, therefore, generating self-cherishing, self-centeredness out of this attachment towards I and my well-being. All right. Therefore, that is the view of the transitory collection. That is the worst misperception. It's the worst in the sense, as I said early on, that gives rise to self-cherishing. No other type does. There's no other type of misapprehension, rude misperception, other than the one that gets the fancy name, the view of the transitory collection, that gives rise to self-centeredness. But sure enough, the view of the transitory collection can also be divided. Why? Oh, okay, sorry. This is still the chart. Mind grasping the self of a person, view of transitory collection, and mind grasping the self of a person that is not oneself. Okay, here just in the form of the chart, perceiving the inherent existence of oneself, and conceptual consciousness perceiving the inherent existence of a living being other than oneself. I mean, that type of conceptual consciousness we have all the time with regard to our spouses, our children, our neighbors, people we're close to, people we're not close to. And even without children, they're kind of part of the I, but it depends on the situation. I mean, oftentimes when we are, fighting with our own kids, then there's in other moments it feels like they're part of me, and in that moment it's different. So it keeps changing. But with regard to the own self, that is pretty much, we never think, oh, my I is over there and my self-grasping is here, or my mind is here and my self is over there. That never happens. With our children, it can be a sense of there's no difference between me and my children, and there can be a sense they're over there, especially when they criticize me and so forth. Oops. All right. Okay. Anyway, I hope I'm not confusing you in any way. But yeah, so the point I'm trying to make is there's this huge difference between holding on to the inherent existence of myself and of other living beings. But as mentioned before, the view of the transitory collection, that can be also subdivided, can be further divided into the view of the transitory collection grasping I, and the view of the transitory collection grasping mind. Grasping I and grasping mind. This is when you study Uma. This is something you study quite for some time, debated for some time, because it's not immediately easy to understand. Well, when you read it fast, it seems easy, but there's some debate on that. Anyway, so the transitory collection, you've got the little drawing, the view of the transitory collection. You have the one that grasps the I and the one that grasps mind. Or in other words, the one that apprehends only the inherent existence of one's I. So you notice the word only. It only perceives the inherent existence of one's I. And the one that perceives the inherent existence of a phenomenon, anything, as being mine. Okay. Now let's look at this. Both types, so whether it's the view of the transitory collection grasping the I, or the view of the transitory collection grasping mind, both types perceive the inherent existence of oneself. Okay, both perceive the inherent existence of the I, one's own I. But the difference is that the first type perceives only the inherent existence of one's I, just perceives I exist truly, I exist. I mean, without even using these words, I'm using these words because I'm trying to convey it, but it's really just that even beyond words, it's sometimes so deeply rooted that it goes beyond words. I mean, on a subtler level, our mind doesn't use words, and still is this sense, if you were to put it into words, I exist inherently. Okay, so that is the first type of just that. Whereas the second type also not just apprehends the inherent existence of the I, but also the exact existence of a phenomenon that, well, usually belongs to oneself, at least conventionally, as being mine. Okay, so the first one is easy, not that difficult. View of the transitory collection grasping the I. But the second one, what else does it grasp at? If it's not just the inherent existence of the I, or like we've heard, it's the inherent existence of mine. So where does the I come in? Inherent existence of mine. That's it. It doesn't grasp at the inherent existence of the self, or does it? So an example of the second type is a conceptual consciousness apprehending the inherent existence of one's body as being mine. Okay, one's body as being mine, this body being mind. I perceive that to be inherently existent. It's not just the inherent existence of one's body, but the inherent existence of one's body as being mine, my body, and that exists inherently. It's my body. And because since this mind conceives the inherent existence of one's body as being mine, it apprehends the inherent existence of one's body as belonging to the I. Therefore, it also perceives the inherent existence of the I. You see how that works? So it's like my body being mine, that exists inherently. What does it mean, my body being mine? My body belonging to the I. And so the mind works in such a way that both that body being mine or belonging to the I and the I are perceived to exist inherently. So you got two in one. Okay? So it's a type of self-grasping. It's a type of, or a mind that grasps at the self of person, or that grasps at the inherent existence of person, although it's a phenomenon being mine, although it perceives the inherent existence of a phenomenon being mine, it also perceives the inherent existence of that phenomenon belonging to I, and thus perceives the inherent existence of the I. I hope I've said that clearly. I sometimes say things I believe I said the right thing, and then when I listen to a recording, I realize I didn't say that at all. So I hope I said it correctly. Anyway, don't trust me, trust what's there, because that I checked. But anyway, so perceiving the inherent existence of the I and just the I. That is the view of the transitory collection, perceiving I. And then when there's anything that is perceived as being, I should say, if the mind perceives the inherent existence of something being mine, then it perceives also the inherent existence of the I, of mine and I both. Okay. And so this is also where the debate comes in a little bit, because it's a little confusing. So please note that there's a difference between a mind perceiving the inherent existence of one's body as being mind, and a mind perceiving the inherent existence of my body. It's a different way in which the mind perceives inherent existence, because the latter type, mind perceiving the inherent existence of my body, does not perceive the inherent existence of the I. While the first type brings the two, it combines the two. It's a mind that perceives this phenomenon being mine to exist inherently, and the I to exist inherently as being the owner of that body and existing inherently. So like I said, it's 2 in 1. In the case of the second, B, a mind perceiving the inherent existence of my body, that is an example of a mind grasping the inherent existence or the self of phenomena. It's not a mind grasping the self of persons. Okay, all right. I hope it's not been too confusing. Like I said, this part is advanced and we do debate it, and it takes some time to kind of wrap your mind around it. But fortunately for summaries, that's really all I said. So in the end, it comes down to that. It's not that difficult. So we've got the root misperception, and that can be divided then. Mind that grasps the self of persons and mind that grasps the self of phenomena. And don't forget, here self means inherent existence, right? In both cases. I said it's confusing, but you get used to it. Before long, you get used to it. So mind that grasps the inherent existence of a person, and mind that grasps the inherent existence of anything else that is not a person, that is not a living being. Okay, that's called mind that grasps the self of phenomena. And then, of course, you need to distinguish between viewing myself as inherently existent versus everyone else. Of course, it's important to distinguish because, as we've heard, here, this gives rise to self-cherishing. Unfortunately, grasping at the inherent existence of yourself does unfortunately not give rise to cherishing others, right? So it's important to understand the mechanics, the workings are different of the mind. That's called the view of the transitory collection, and the mind grasping the self of a person that is not oneself. I know here the terminology is weird, but you get used to it like anything. And then you've got the view of the transitory collection grasping the I, and the view of the transitory collection grasping mind. Okay, I'm not on gallery right now. I want to see your faces. How do I do this? Gallery. No, I can't get to gallery. I can only see Tammy and myself. So I wonder, Tammy, watch out. For some reason, yeah, different people appear, but I want to know whether I've gone too quick. Have I gone too fast? Let me just check whether I can see everyone. Now I see Edward and Raphael. Did I go too fast? Still clear? I see Venerable Lobsang and Venerable David. Is it okay? It's not too fast? No, okay. And then I see Hila's iPad and B. B not too fast? No. Claudia and Divya, I can't see the rest. Okay, so I'm trusting. I hope that it's okay. I'm terrible with this technical stuff. But anyway, okay, so that's it. That's the division. That's how we study it. Maybe not in that way. It takes a little longer until we've gone through it. The first year you learn about this division and then that one. But Lama Tsongkhapa pretty much mentions all of them. So I decided to go through them in the same way. Now, The conceptual consciousness, or the conceptual mind, perceiving the inherent existence of a phenomenon is called root misperception. By now, I think we know why, but anyway, might as well mention it, because it is a wrong consciousness that is the root of samsara. It is the root cause of all other afflictions. So usually we blame our parents or our neighbor, or, well, let's go back to the root misperception. And in case of our own problems, pretty much our own root misperception, that we just can't help it. As long as we have that, we can reduce self-cherishing. Oh yeah, big time, we can reduce it, but we cannot totally uproot it, because to uproot it means to get rid of this mind, conceptual mind, perceiving the inherent existence of a phenomenon. Like I said, it's the root cause of all other afflictions, of contaminated karma, that is volitional actions that arise out of these afflictions, that are motivated by these afflictions, and of course, the resulting suffering, and must be eliminated to overcome cyclic existence and attain the state of a Buddha. The analogy is that of a poisonous tree, the root of which must be eliminated in order to prevent the harmful effects of the tree's poisonous branches, leaves, and fruits. So the branches are like the afflictions, the leaves are like contaminated karma, and the fruits are like suffering. Okay, now you've got a pretty tree. And someone suggested, well, why don't you choose an ugly tree? Okay, so it's really not easy to find a scary tree that they look ridiculous, like, I don't know, scowling trees, frowning trees with funny faces. But then I thought, well, actually, if we look at this tree as an analogy or a metaphor for root misperception, self-cherishing, attachment, they seem pretty to us, right? I mean, self-cherishing seems really important. If I don't look after myself, if I don't grasp it, if I don't care for myself, who will? There's a sense self-cherishing is necessary. First of all, we're not even aware of the root misperception. And even if we are, we feel like, well, that's a correct mind. But I want to exist inherently. Are you kidding me? I mean, like I said some time ago, if I ask my mom to exist inherently and I explain that to her, she'd go, sure, of course I do. It appears that way. And then self-cherishing, yeah, well, if I'm not selfish, then who else will look after me, kind of idea, right? So that seems important. And attachment and anger, I mean, there are plenty of people who feel these are important. Of course, attachment, in fact, we take it from the term a mother forming attachment to her child, which has a slightly different meaning. It's more like this bond, which is a positive one from a Buddhist point of view as well. But it's like, it can lead, of course, to this exaggerated not being able to let go and wanting to control. And that's when we've got attachment. And anger, some people think anger is necessary. Anger gives us energy and so forth. But of course, from a Buddhist point of view, compassion gives much more energy, and anger, the longer it festers, the more it harms us. So it looks like a beautiful tree that, beautiful, but in actuality, that's just how it appears to us. But it's got these fruits, these red poisonous. So I thought, well, in nature, usually that which is poisonous has got bright colors. So actually the tree didn't have those. I planted those later and put them in there. So they're not the same size, as you see, because I can put them in the same size. But the point is, those are the fruits of suffering, poisonous. This is a poisonous tree. It's supposed to be. It looks pretty, but in the end, it's got all these aspects of root misperception, self-cherishing, attachment, anger, karmic actions, and suffering. All right. Okay. So that's why it's called the root misperception. I'm purposely not using the term ignorance, because ignorance is a particular mental factor. Not all misperceptions are ignorance. Ignorance is like the root ignorance is a root misperception, but it's talking about a specific mental function or mental factor, which is why any mind that arises together with the root ignorance is a root misperception. So root misperception is more of a blanket term. It encompasses more minds that perceive inherent existence. In fact, it refers to any mind that apprehends, that actively grasps at inherent existence. And please don't confuse that with a mind to which inherent existence merely appears. That's different. To all our minds, inherent existence appears, but not all our minds hold, grasp at inherent existence. So that's a difference. That's a huge difference. So we're talking about that mind that actively grasps at inherent existence. All right, so we've done a lot today. Actually, remember, before we start meditating, to summarize, I want to do that. So we're moving closer towards actually starting with the first verse. I realize we've been going for 4 months and you're probably itching to start with the text. But I feel like, well, Lama Tsongkhapa gave us this introduction. There's a reason for doing so. I want to do the same thing and just give you that foundation. And once we start, we can, of course, move much faster through the verses than we're moving right now. It always takes a little time to give an introduction. Okay, but anyway, what I talked about today was basically this, giving you the categories in terms of what is perceived to exist inherently. The minds are all the same, perceiving inherent existence. They're all the same, but the question is of what? And there lies the difference. And it's important to recognize because they perform different functions, whether it is a mind that grasps the inherent existence of person or a phenomenon other than person. And of course, we all know our attachment towards people is much stronger, ourselves and others much stronger than towards phenomena, right? Our anger and other afflictive emotions much stronger when it comes to living beings versus inanimate objects. So just from the point of view of what these root misperceptions give rise to, it's important to distinguish. And then, of course, very important, the view of the transitory collection versus a mind that grasps the inherent existence of someone else. Again, although it's really just perceiving the I to exist inherently or someone else, so inherent existence, that is grasped in the same way and still very different. What it gives rise to, what afflictions it gives rise to. And then lastly, the view of the transitory collection grasping I, that is only grasping at the inherent existence of the I, but that is also grasping at the inherent existence of mine. That is more powerful because it includes my children, my country, my football club, my foot, my body, my mind, all of this. And again, this is just I. Okay, that's bad enough. And it does give rise to a lot of other afflictions, but this one is reaches further. It's more far reaching in that sense. And again, it's important to distinguish between those two. And of course, then lastly, we talked about the root misperception being like this root. So of course, first I was thinking, in my mind, it was like, yeah, we cut the root. And I was thinking, yeah, but we never cut the root. It was like, who cuts a tree by digging a hole and cutting? No, you cut the trunk. That's why first I had chopped off the root. And then I was like, no, it's not chopping off. It's eliminating the root. By chopping off the tree right about here, you eliminate the root. Okay, it dies. And it doesn't grow any further. So it's okay to say you eliminate the root by chopping the trunk at this point, roughly at this point, because then it won't grow again. Anyway, so you have to eliminate the root. Anyway, that's important. And that's like the root misperception, which, of course, if it's not uprooted, if it's not cut, then there are the other aspects. Okay, so that was a little more than last time, but anyway, it didn't take that long to go through it. And all that's left is to meditate on it. Just need to check the time to make sure I don't go for too long. So let's start with some meditation, some breathing meditation, of course, as usual. To just let go of any disruptive thoughts, just calm down the mind. Now let's focus on the fact that all our trouble, and in fact, all the trouble and all the suffering of cyclic existence has arisen from the root misperception. Conceptual consciousness that apprehends, perceives the inherent existence of some phenomenon. So you have an agent, you have an activity, and an object. The agent, or that which acts, is the conceptual consciousness. Its activity is to perceive something, to perceive. And its object is something that's impossible, which is inherent existence of a phenomenon. Even though whatever is a root misperception is the same in that it apprehends inherent existence, there is a difference when it comes to what it exactly is that a root misperception grasps to exist inherently. So we distinguish between the root misperception apprehending the inherent existence of a living being, and a root misperception apprehending the inherent existence of anything else that is not a living being. One reason is that the first type mind grasping at the inherent existence of a living being gives rise to much stronger afflictive emotions such as anger, attachment, and so forth. And the second type, in general, our attachment towards people, and our hatred towards people, towards living beings is usually stronger than that towards inanimate objects. But of course, there's also a difference between grasping at the inherent existence of myself versus grasping at the inherent existence of someone else. Which is why we distinguish between the view of the transitory collection and the mind that grasps at the inherent existence of someone who's not oneself. Since we all know that the view of the transitory collection, or the mind apprehending the inherent existence of myself, gives rise to self-cherishing or self-centeredness. Whereas the mind that apprehends the inherent existence of another person does not trigger a mind that cherishes the other person. It's much more likely to give rise to indifference, resentment, Or yeah, attachment, but attachment that triggers the wish to control the other person. The wish not to be separate from them, and so forth. And then when it comes to the view of the transitory collection, we can divide it into the view of the transitory collection grasping I, and the view of the transitory collection grasping mine. First case, or in the first case, I merely apprehend the inherent existence of my own self. While in the second case, I apprehend the inherent existence of something being mine, of belonging to the I, and thereby the same mind also perceives the inherent existence of I. Of my I. And again, the first type that merely apprehends the inherent existence of myself, in general, it just gives rise to self-cherishing. While the second type reaches further. Perceives my body and my mind as being inherently mine. Or the inherent existence of my family being mine. My community being mine. My country, and so forth. Giving rise to attachment that goes beyond just the I. type of attachment that can be more destructive. Therefore, it's important to understand these categories of root misperception. Understand what it can give rise to, what other afflictive emotions it can trigger, or they can trigger. So now to conclude this analytical meditation, let's apply stabilizing meditation by focusing on whatever insight, whatever feeling has arisen. And to allow for that feeling, for that insight to internalize it further. And then to make sure that the positive potential we've accumulated together will assist us in our endeavor to work towards enlightenment. Let's dedicate it in an effective way. First of all, towards our own Buddhahood. May this become a cause for us to attain the fully enlightened state of a Buddha, to be of greatest benefit, not just to ourselves, but to all sentient beings. May this merit also help us right here, right now, in such a way that we dedicate it towards the long life of our great lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other highly realized masters, to have a long and healthy life. And finally, let's dedicate it towards all sentient beings, right here and right now. May it help those who are sick, like Geshe, Tali Lubin, and everyone else, to quickly recover. May it also help those who make very destructive decisions and cause conflict and disputes and so forth, to find compassion and wisdom in their heart and to change their actions. And so, while reflecting on that, I'll recite the dedication prayer. So please reflect on there it is. We can recite it together. So please reflect on what we just went through. Keep that in mind. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chinrezi, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry, 7 minutes. Too late, too long. Okay, I'll keep trying to finish on time. Anyway, have a great week. Remember death. Have a week with a lot of death, if you can, on a daily basis. And then I'll see you alive and well, hopefully, next Sunday. No, Monday. All right. Bye. Be well.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.